Hi, it's Edie here. I help stressed out people own their lives and their teams to own their team by helping them develop powerful self-care practices, also known as habits. I'm coming to you from the home office in San Antonio, Texas. Today I'd like to talk about compassion fatigue and its effect on both the individual and on the team because they are definitely intertwined. Compassion fatigue is a cluster of symptoms that surround people who work relentlessly with other people's pain. I particularly work with the 911 emergency communications community, but there are other professions that are powerfully affected. And so this is not just for 911, this is for anybody who's in these kinds of occupations where you're dealing with human tragedy all the time. Compassion fatigue has symptoms that are just like PTSD. It's only the beginnings of it that are the difference. And so we have sleeplessness, we have depression, we have somatic complaints, which means your body hurts. You get more headaches and stomach aches and that sort of thing. There's shame associated with it. There's a sense of powerlessness, a sense of helplessness, and a sense that one can never do enough. We cannot possibly overcome the issues that affect the people that we serve. And so this cluster of symptoms is so difficult and so challenging for us because when I've experienced it, it's been easy to not recognize that the pressure was getting to be too much. Because we live under pressure, right? There's always stress in work. There's always stress in our day-to-day. Stress is sort of kind of the power driver of our lives. Without stress, I don't know who we would be. I don't think that snails have a lot of stress, but I don't want to live like a snail. My experience with compassion fatigue when I was in 911, the symptoms that showed up the first that I recognized as symptoms, it may have been other things that showed up first, but when I recognized it, I was sick all the time. I had stomach problems, I had headaches, I had a general achiness all the time, and I was exhausted, always tired. Now I was working the overnight shift from 11 at night till 7 in the morning, and I had 3 children still at home and a house to take care of and lots of overtime because we were short-staffed, and there was just a lot going on in my life. And I started getting to where every time I woke up to go to work, I had to go through this process in my mind. Am I sick enough to call off sick? Not, am I sick? I knew I was sick. Am I sick enough to justify staying home? Because it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to bed every day, every single day. Am I sick enough? Oh, that's no good place to be, is it? As a result, well, let me go through my decision process. So I would check and make sure that I didn't have a temperature, and I would get up and get moving because I knew that once I got up and got moving that things did seem to settle down and I did seem to feel better. And I would think about who is going to be inconvenienced, who's going to have to work. And I care about my team. I care about the women and men that I worked with. And so I did not want to inconvenience anybody. And so I would find the courage and the strength to get my booty to work, and I would make it through the shift. When it got to where I was calling in sick, that was when I knew it was a problem, because I'm not a person who misses work. I show up. I have to really be sick. And so I knew that there was something wrong with me. Now, the effect this had on my team, can you imagine? Can you imagine having somebody come to work every day, pissing and moaning and complaining about not feeling good? How does that lighten the team? How does that keep things going well? And I don't know about you, but I know that when I don't feel well, I'm a little crankier, even crankier than normal. I'm not usually cranky, but really cranky and sharp. And so, quick response in a negative way. Imagine the effect that has on the team. Imagine I became a supervisor and was experiencing these symptoms. And so my snappiness and my crankiness got filtered out onto how I treated my teammates, the people whose work I was responsible for, the people that I was there to support, the people that I was there to build up, to make sure that they had what they needed to do a good job. I was the one who was cranky with them. I was horrible sometimes. Now, I have a naturally optimistic personality, and so I wasn't horrible all the time. But it doesn't take very many doses of horrible for it to make things bad. And this is what happens in teams. So when you have somebody, when you have a coworker who isn't pulling their weight, who seems sick all the time, who is cranky, and they make a mistake, what do you think? Do you think it's a one-time event, just kind of a glitch? Or do you think it's a character defect and they'll never do well? That turns out to be based in relationship and in-group and out-group stuff. If they're in our close inner circle, we're going to give them a bye. We're going to say, this is a one-time event. This is not like them. But if they're in an out-group, we're going to decide it's a character defect and we're going to hold it against them. And that's what happens in these teams, is that depending on the person's status within the group, they could be excluded, they could be ostracized. Ostracization does not help build a good team dynamic, does it? And so this compassion fatigue is rooted in the individual and their behavior, but it's also brings about group dynamics that are destructive to the team. Now, if you have more than one person who is suffering at the same time, and we often do, right? Because in a high stress environment, everybody's under high stress. Things deteriorate. When teams go through trauma, for instance, in a 911 team, when there's an officer killed, we have to layer on grief. And the thing with a 911 team is that there's no time for grief. The feelings have to be stuffed while you're at work. And they spurt out, they pop out in anger and in blaming and in negativity. Teams can go down a drain, and so they get short-staffed. So when teams are short-staffed, you can't just say, oh, well, we're just not going to answer 911 today. Somebody has to fill that chair. And so mandatory overtime comes up. And so in addition to grieving and compassion fatigue and being pulled in different directions, we're hitting exhaustion. Exhaustion does not help. It does not make things better. And so a new person comes into this team that's exhausted and cranky and doesn't like each other. And how long do they last? How can you build a team with a team that is so dysfunctional? And that's the problem that we face in a lot of our 911 PSAPs now. So, what's the solution? Well, there's lots of little solutions. One is we've got to pay attention to our own well-being, so we've got to develop the habits that we need. We've got to come together and recognize the negative effects of compassion fatigue on our relationships and on each of us. And we've got to find a way to learn to accept one another and not attribute character flaws to the symptoms that are showing up. And we've got to make a decision that we're going to stay the course, that we're going to get through this. And we've got to figure out how to welcome new people in and bring them along and help them be strong in the headset. We got to pay attention to our team's well-being. We've got to pay attention to this negativity. And so one of the things that I recommend for people is to do an assessment, to check and see how people are doing. There are online free assessments that you can have your team do. If you want a recommendation, I can make one, but you'll need to message me. Assess. Pull people in and listen to them. Love your team well enough to do the work, to find out where we're at, and to be intentional about saying where we're at is not a good place, but we can do better. We can come together. We can learn to respect and love each other, even in difficult work. We can stop thinking that other people's mistakes are character defects instead of mistakes. Kind of heavy stuff, isn't it? The thing is that there's hope. There's hope that we can pull this together, that we can support each other well enough, that we can pay close enough attention to our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, and get healthy in the headset, and get healthy, and rock this world. I mean, 911 communications teams come together and do amazing things. You cannot, if you've not been in 911, you cannot imagine how many different things have to happen in an emergency situation. When we're talking about, say, the building collapse in Florida, or a hurricane, or a tornado, or a mass shooting, or any other event that's a multi-car accident. There's so many different things that you have to get done, and you've got to remember them all. You've got to remember that you've got to call this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, even as the phone calls are coming in, even as you've got radio traffic coming in, even as you are dispatching help. You've got to take care of all this other stuff. These teams come together and do amazing things. They deserve our support, but they also deserve each other's support. And that's what I'm here to help us learn to do. It's my privilege to serve the 911 community. I am so excited to be able to walk on this journey with heroes. So that's what I have for you today. Have an amazing day.